There comes a moment in life when you realize you have been standing on the sidelines of your own destiny, watching circumstances unfold as if they were fixed, immovable, and somehow outside your control. You have visualized, you have hoped, you have asked for signs, and yet something still feels suspended, as if your desires exist in theory, but refuse to crystallize into tangible reality. That subtle frustration, that quiet doubt you rarely admit out loud, is not a sign that manifestation is failing you. It is a sign that you have been observing more than creating. To observe is to analyze, to measure, to question whether it is working. To create is different. Creation demands participation. It requires emotional alignment, decisive intention, and the willingness to embody the version of yourself who already lives in the outcome you seek. Many people remain trapped in what could be called the observer phase, constantly scanning their environment for proof, while unknowingly reinforcing the very patterns they wish to escape. The mind becomes hyper-focused on the absence of results, and that focus quietly strengthens the old identity. Quantum manifestation is not about forcing the universe to respond. It is about transforming the internal state that shapes how you perceive, act, and respond to life itself. When your emotional signature changes, your behavior changes. When your behavior changes, your results inevitably follow. This is the shift from passive witness to deliberate creator. And once you understand this transition at a deeper level, you will realize that nothing has been withheld from you. The only thing that was missing was your full participation in the act of creation. There is a subtle but powerful difference between wanting a new reality and being internally prepared to sustain it. Many people believe they are ready for change because they can clearly describe what they desire. They can visualize the relationship, the financial freedom, the emotional peace, or the professional recognition. Yet beneath that surface clarity lies an emotional pattern that has not shifted. The body continues rehearsing old frustrations. The mind keeps scanning for evidence that nothing is happening. This is where the observer phase quietly takes control. When someone remains in observation mode, their attention becomes anchored to the absence of results. They measure time obsessively. They interpret neutral events as setbacks. They look for confirmation that something is moving, and when it does not move fast enough, doubt intensifies. This hyper-focus on when and how subtly reinforces the current identity. Neuroscience suggests that repeated emotional states condition the nervous system to expect familiar outcomes. If frustration, impatience, or insecurity dominate internally, the body memorizes those states as normal. In that condition, even if opportunity appears, the individual may unconsciously reject it because it feels unfamiliar. The misunderstanding many carry about manifestation is the belief that thought alone generates change. Thoughts initiate direction, but emotional coherence sustains it. When intention is not matched by emotional alignment, there is friction. You may say you want abundance, but if your daily emotional baseline is scarcity and comparison, your nervous system remains tuned to threat rather than expansion. The quantum perspective suggests that perception influences interaction with reality. In practical terms, what you consistently expect shapes what you notice, and what you notice influences how you act. A counterintuitive realization emerges here. Constantly checking for results can delay them. The act of monitoring progress from a place of doubt communicates internal instability. It is similar to planting a seed and digging it up every day to see if it has grown. The energy behind obsessive observation is not trust. It is fear disguised as vigilance. Fear narrows attention. It limits creativity. It keeps behavior reactive rather than intentional. Creation begins when identity shifts before evidence appears. This does not mean pretending outcomes exist. It means stabilizing a new internal reference point. Instead of asking, "Is it happening yet?" the internal dialogue evolves into, "How does the version of me who already chose this path think and respond today?" That subtle shift reorganizes focus. Behavior begins aligning with long-term intention rather than short-term emotional fluctuation. There is also a layer of emotional protection operating beneath observation. If someone does not fully commit, they can avoid full disappointment. By staying half-engaged, they preserve the narrative that external forces are responsible. This protective mechanism is understandable, especially for those who have experienced repeated setbacks. However, it also prevents transformation. Creation requires vulnerability. It requires the willingness to embody possibility without immediate proof. Consider how identity forms through repetition. If you repeatedly tell yourself that nothing ever works out, your brain strengthens neural pathways associated with that belief. Over time, this becomes automatic. You may not even consciously think the phrase anymore, yet your behavior reflects it. The observer phase thrives on this repetition because it feels safe. Creating, on the other hand, disrupts the pattern. It introduces unfamiliar emotional territory such as confidence without validation, patience without visible reward, and consistency without applause. The transition from observer to creator is not dramatic. It is quiet and internal. It is the moment you decide that your emotional state will no longer depend on immediate feedback. It is when you recognize that waiting for proof keeps you anchored to the past. Instead of scanning for change, you begin embodying it. Instead of reacting to circumstances, you respond from intention. This is where manifestation ceases to be an abstract concept and becomes a lived process. The shift is subtle, but its consequences are profound, because once identity stabilizes in a new state, reality gradually reorganizes around it. There is a hidden tension that lives inside many people who are pursuing transformation. On the surface, they declare faith in possibility, yet internally they negotiate with doubt. They say they are aligned, yet they tolerate environments, relationships, and habits that contradict the very future they claim to desire. This internal dissonance is subtle, but it creates a powerful, energetic friction. The observer phase thrives in that friction because it allows a person to remain in analysis rather than embodiment. Dissonance appears when desire and tolerance coexist. Someone may want prosperity while continuing to accept chronic undervaluation. They may want emotional peace while remaining attached to conversations and patterns that constantly disturb their nervous system. This gap between vision and lived standards sends a confusing signal internally. The body registers inconsistency. When identity is not congruent with declared intention, manifestation feels delayed, not because the universe is withholding, but because the internal structure is unstable. There is also a refined form of self-protection operating beneath this inconsistency. It does not look like sabotage in the traditional sense. It appears as caution, as overthinking, as endless preparation. The mind convinces itself that it is being responsible by waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect clarity, the perfect confidence. In reality, this perpetual preparation preserves the familiar. As long as action remains conceptual, vulnerability remains minimal. And as long as vulnerability remains minimal, the old identity remains intact. Another misunderstanding lies in the idea that faith alone is sufficient. Faith without internal permission creates tension. Many individuals believe in abundance intellectually, yet emotionally feel unworthy of sustaining it. There may be layers of inherited beliefs about struggle, about deservingness, about what success requires. These layers do not disappear simply because a new affirmation is introduced. They surface quietly through behavior, through hesitation, through over-explaining, through minimizing achievements. The observer phase feeds on this internal conflict because it keeps attention on external validation rather than internal alignment. Attention itself functions like currency. Where attention flows, emotional energy follows. If attention is habitually directed toward comparison, urgency, and perceived lack, the nervous system adapts to that climate. Over time, stress becomes normalized. The body remains in subtle survival mode, even when no immediate threat exists. In this state, creativity narrows. Decision-making becomes reactive. Opportunities may appear, yet they are filtered through skepticism. The individual does not realize that the filter itself is shaping perception. There is a paradox here that often goes unnoticed. The more someone tries to control every variable in order to guarantee a result, the less internally flexible they become. Control can masquerade as commitment, but it frequently stems from fear of uncertainty. Creation, however, requires emotional elasticity. It involves stabilizing intention while allowing outcomes to unfold in ways that may not match preconceived scripts. When rigidity dominates, disappointment becomes inevitable because reality rarely conforms exactly to expectation. Consistency of emotional state plays a more decisive role than intensity of motivation. Intense bursts of enthusiasm feel powerful, Yet, if followed by periods of doubt and withdrawal, the overall pattern remains unstable. Identity is not shaped by occasional inspiration. It is shaped by repeated emotional baselines. If calm certainty replaces anxious anticipation, behavior gradually reorganizes around long-term vision. If grounded confidence replaces constant comparison, relationships and opportunities begin reflecting that shift. The observer phase dissolves when internal standards evolve. This evolution does not announce itself loudly. It appears as subtle decisions: what is tolerated, what is entertained mentally, what is no longer negotiated. As alignment strengthens, the need for external proof weakens. Instead of scanning for confirmation, there is a quiet knowing that movement is already underway. In that state, actions feel less forced. They feel coherent. The individual is no longer waiting for reality to validate them. They are embodying the identity that naturally interacts with a different level of reality. And from that embodiment, creation unfolds with less resistance and greater stability. Time becomes a silent pressure when desire is strong. The longer something takes to materialize, the more the mind begins to question its own alignment. Days feel heavier. Weeks feel symbolic. The calendar transforms into a scoreboard, measuring perceived progress. This relationship with time is one of the most underestimated forces that keeps a person in the observer phase. When urgency intensifies, attention contracts. And when attention contracts, possibility feels smaller. Urgency often disguises itself as ambition. It appears productive, driven, even disciplined. Yet beneath that surface lies fear. Fear that if results do not appear quickly, they may never appear at all. This fear shifts the emotional baseline into subtle anxiety. The body remains alert, scanning for signs of movement. In this state, manifestation becomes conditional. Faith is extended only as long as progress is visible. The moment silence appears, doubt enters. The challenge with urgency is that it ties identity to immediate feedback. If something moves forward, confidence rises. If something stalls, self-trust declines. This emotional oscillation destabilizes consistency. The nervous system begins to associate desire with pressure rather than expansion. Over time, the original intention becomes entangled with stress. What began as inspiration slowly transforms into tension. Visualization, in this context, can also become distorted. Imagining a future outcome is powerful when it stabilizes identity. However, when visualization is used as escape from dissatisfaction with the present, it reinforces separation. The future feels distant, and the present feels inadequate. Instead of integrating the desired identity into daily life, the mind treats it as a temporary fantasy. The body senses the gap between imagination and lived experience. That gap creates friction. There is a deeper layer to this dynamic. Many people unconsciously equate speed with worthiness. If success happens quickly, it confirms value. If it unfolds gradually, it feels like rejection. This interpretation places immense emotional weight on timing. Yet growth in most areas of life follows patterns that are rarely linear. Seeds do not sprout faster because they are watched. Muscles do not strengthen because progress is demanded. Biological and psychological systems respond to consistency, not impatience. Silence is often misinterpreted as absence. In reality, silence can signal integration. When new emotional patterns begin forming, there is often a period where external evidence remains unchanged. This in-between space is uncomfortable because it lacks immediate validation. The observer phase becomes tempting here. The mind wants reassurance. It wants proof that effort is not wasted. But creation deepens during this quiet interval. Internal wiring reorganizes before external shifts become visible. Another dimension of time-related tension involves control. When outcomes do not follow a specific schedule, the impulse to tighten control intensifies. Plans become rigid. Expectations become detailed. There is an attempt to manage every variable, yet excessive control narrows perception. It reduces flexibility. It limits the ability to recognize alternative pathways through which manifestation might unfold. A controlled mind struggles to perceive unexpected opportunity. There is a significant distinction between holding intention and gripping outcome. Holding intention stabilizes direction without emotional strain. Gripping outcome attaches identity to a particular timeline and format. When grip loosens, perception widens. The nervous system relaxes. Creativity increases. Decisions become clearer because they are not driven by panic. Emotional endurance plays a decisive role in this stage. The ability to remain steady without visible confirmation strengthens internal authority. Instead of reacting to temporary silence, there is a grounded awareness that transformation often begins beneath the surface. This steadiness shifts behavior. Actions become less reactive and more intentional. Conversations carry different energy. Choices reflect long-term alignment rather than short-term relief. As urgency dissolves, something subtle but profound changes. Desire no longer feels like pressure. It feels like direction. The future is not chased, it is embodied incrementally. Time becomes less of an adversary and more of a medium through which growth unfolds. In that state, the observer identity weakens because there is nothing to measure obsessively. There is only participation in a process already in motion. And within that participation, creation stabilizes into something far more sustainable than urgency ever allowed. Modern life trains the mind to crave stimulation. Notifications, rapid information, constant comparison, and the endless availability of new techniques create an environment where attention rarely rests. In this atmosphere, many individuals move from one method of manifestation to another, from one philosophy to the next, believing that the missing breakthrough lies in discovering the right formula. What quietly develops beneath this search is fragmentation. The observer identity becomes sophisticated, informed and analytical, yet rarely embodied. The search itself can become a distraction. When the mind constantly consumes new strategies, it experiences a temporary surge of motivation. That surge feels like progress, it feels productive. However, without sustained emotional integration, that motivation fades as quickly as it appeared. The cycle repeats. Another concept is explored. Another system is studied. Meanwhile, the internal state remains largely unchanged. Knowledge accumulates, but identity remains anchored to familiar patterns. There is a biological dimension to this dynamic. The brain releases dopamine not only when achieving outcomes, but also when anticipating novelty. Learning something new stimulates this anticipation, yet anticipation is not the same as transformation. Anticipation can create the illusion of movement without requiring deep internal change. True creation, however, requires repetition. It requires remaining with a chosen identity long enough for it to feel natural rather than aspirational. Emotional consistency plays a far more powerful role than dramatic intensity. Intensity is compelling. It creates momentum. It generates declarations and ambitious plans. But intensity without stability often leads to exhaustion. The nervous system cannot sustain heightened emotional states indefinitely. When intensity fades, discouragement may follow, reinforcing the belief that nothing works long-term. Consistency, in contrast, is quieter. It does not announce itself loudly. It builds gradually. Over time, it rewires perception and response patterns in ways that intensity alone cannot accomplish. Distraction also fragments intention. When attention is divided among multiple goals, identities, and expectations, the emotional signal becomes diluted. Manifestation is not solely about desire, it is about coherence. Coherence emerges when thoughts, emotions, and behaviors align toward a singular direction. If daily habits contradict declared intentions, the signal weakens. For example, someone who desires clarity yet lives in constant overstimulation may struggle to access intuition. Someone who seeks abundance yet continuously entertains narratives of limitation may unconsciously reinforce scarcity. There is another subtle layer in the craving for novelty. It protects against depth. Depth requires confronting discomfort. When an individual commits to one path long enough, unresolved emotions surface. Old insecurities become visible. Doubts that were previously masked by constant learning demand attention. At this stage, switching strategies feels easier than confronting those layers. The observer identity thrives on movement without penetration. It prefers surface shifts over internal excavation. Creation demands an environment that supports stability. This includes emotional regulation, focused attention, and boundaries around what influences the mind. When external input decreases, internal awareness increases. patterns become more visible. Emotional triggers become easier to identify. In this clarity, subtle adjustments can take place. Identity begins to solidify not because of constant stimulation, but because of repeated reinforcement of chosen values. There are also subtle signals that indicate misalignment. Chronic restlessness, persistent comparison, and the inability to remain present often reveal that the mind is overstimulated. In this condition, even promising opportunities may feel unsatisfying because the nervous system has adapted to rapid fluctuation. Slower growth feels insufficient. Yet it is precisely in slower, consistent engagement that deeper transformation occurs. The metaphor of cultivation illustrates this dynamic. A garden does not thrive because seeds are constantly replaced with new varieties. It thrives when soil conditions remain stable, when nourishment is consistent, and when attention is steady. Likewise, internal change flourishes when intention is sustained beyond initial excitement. When distractions lose their dominance, clarity strengthens. When clarity strengthens, action becomes more deliberate. Over time, results reflect that steadiness. As fragmentation decreases, something remarkable unfolds. The need to search diminishes. Confidence becomes less dependent on external validation or new information. Identity feels rooted rather than experimental. In that rooted state, the observer dissolves because there is no longer a compulsion to monitor constantly. There is engagement instead. There is presence. And within that presence, creation ceases to feel like a distant possibility and begins to operate as a natural extension of who one has chosen to become. The shift from observing to creating is not dramatic on the outside. It is decisive on the inside. Throughout this journey, one truth becomes unmistakable. Reality begins to reorganize when identity stabilizes. The observer waits for evidence before committing emotionally. The creator commits internally before evidence appears. That distinction changes everything. When emotional coherence replaces anxiety, when consistency replaces intensity, and when embodiment replaces analysis, life starts reflecting a new standard. Nothing in this process requires force. It requires alignment. It requires the willingness to release the constant need for proof and to inhabit a state that feels unfamiliar at first, but gradually becomes natural. The nervous system adapts to what is repeated. If doubt is repeated, doubt becomes default. If grounded certainty is repeated, certainty becomes baseline. Over time, choices, conversations, and opportunities begin aligning with that baseline. Creation is not about controlling outcomes. It is about becoming the version of yourself who interacts differently with outcomes. When urgency softens, distraction decreases, and internal standards rise, manifestation stops feeling mystical and starts feeling logical. You are no longer reacting to circumstances. You are participating in shaping them. And in that participation, the observer phase ends, not because something external changed first, but because you did. Now let this question stay with you for a moment. If your current reality reflects the identity you have been embodying, who would you need to become for your next level to feel inevitable? That question alone has the power to redefine the direction of your life. If this perspective resonated with you, subscribe to the channel so you continue strengthening this shift from observer to creator. There is a deeper layer to this transformation, and the next video on your screen expands exactly on that. Keep watching, because the moment you decide to participate fully in your own evolution, everything begins to move.